All right, let's get ready to dive deep into one of those real cornerstones of political thought. Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes.
Yeah.
We're not just skimming the surface here.
No,
We're
no.
going deep, deep into these ideas.
Yeah.
Really shaped how we understand power, government.
Even human nature itself, right?
Yeah, human nature, the whole thing.
It's a big one.
And one of the things that I think is so interesting about Leviathan is how Hobbes takes these really complicated, I mean, these are huge ideas. How does he do it?
Yeah.
Makes them tangible,
Yeah.
through this metaphor of the Leviathan, this giant artificial man representing the Commonwealth.
It is a brilliant way to kind of get your head around how societies function and work, these kind of mechanics.
Yeah, it's a really cool way to think about it.
Yeah.
So before we even get to the Leviathan, though, let's start with just Hobbes's view of humanity.
Okay.
I mean, he describes us as machines,
Yeah.
even going so far as to compare like the heart to a spring and nerves to strings and joints to wheels. That's right.
I mean, it's pretty striking imagery, I gotta say.
It is, yeah, and it's way more than just like a quirky analogy. It's
Yeah.
really like the foundation of his entire philosophy.
Wow.
He believed that we're all driven by desires and aversions.
Okay.
So we're constantly seeking out pleasure, avoiding pain,
Right.
Just like a machine reacts to these external forces.
Yeah.
We're reacting to those internal drives and forces, pushing and pulling us in different directions.
So our actions are essentially, they're predetermined by these forces. I mean, that doesn't leave a lot of room for free will in that thought process.
That's the question, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a question that philosophers have been, kind of going back and forth on for centuries.
Yeah, yeah.
But for Hobbes, this kind of mechanistic view of human nature
Okay.
leads to this really, I don't know, maybe even kind of bleak picture of what life would be like if we didn't have government.
What he calls the state of nature.
Okay, well, let's dive into the state of nature then.
Okay.
I mean, what does a world without rules and laws look like, according to Hobbes?
So imagine a world, right, where everybody has a right to everything.
Okay.
Sounds pretty appealing at first,
Yes,
right?
I mean, on the surface, sure.
Yeah, but without any kind of authority to enforce agreements or to protect people, individuals,
Yeah.
this really quickly descends into what he calls a war of all against all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, life becomes, in his words, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short.
That's a pretty rough picture he's painting.
It's not great,
Yeah.
but that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
That bleakness, that's what he's getting at here. It's what
Yeah.
makes us want order, right? It makes
Yeah.
us crave security,
Yeah.
even at the cost of some of our freedoms, that we might have otherwise.
That's a really interesting point, and kind of leads us to his solution to all of this, the social contract.
Mm.
Can you explain a little bit how we escape this brutal state of nature?
So the social contract
Yeah.
is really the cornerstone of his whole political thought, right?
Okay.
It's the agreement that we all make. We're all kind of bound by this,
Yeah.
that we're going to give up some of our natural rights
Okay.
to a sovereign power.
To something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, in exchange for getting protection and establishing social order.
So we're trading absolute freedom for security, for peace, for some semblance of order.
That's exactly right.
I mean, it's a calculated sacrifice.
It is.
But how does this powerful sovereign, I mean, we're talking about this Leviathan.
Yeah, the Leviathan, yeah.
How does this Leviathan actually ensure order and prevent us from falling back into that primal state?
Well, I mean, that's where the beauty of the Leviathan metaphor comes in, right?
Right.
So Hobbes uses this imagery of this artificial man,
Yeah.
right, to represent the Commonwealth and the way it works. So think about it this way. The sovereign is like the artificial soul of this thing, right?
Yeah.
Directing all the actions.
Okay, so the sovereign is the soul.
The soul, yeah, and then you got the magistrates.
Uh-huh.
They're like the joints, right? Ensuring that the body politic is working the way it's supposed to.
So we've got the soul, we've got the joints.
And then you've got the, rewards and punishments. Those are the nerves, right?
Okay.
Motivating people to obey and also deterring them from dissenting, making sure they're playing by the rules.
It's amazing.
Hobbes is so brilliant because he maps this whole body politic out.
Yeah.
Showing how every part contributes to that overall health and stability.
Yeah, it's like an anatomical diagram of of society.
It
It's
is.
so cool.
It's such a powerful visual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. But I have to ask, I mean, isn't there some kind of danger in giving so much power to the sovereign?
Well, I mean, that's the question, right? I mean, that leads us to one of the most kind of maybe controversial parts of Hobbes,
Yeah.
the argument for absolute sovereignty.
Absolute sovereignty. Okay, so this is where I think some people might start to get a little nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about absolute power.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't that just open the door for tyranny? I mean, what's stopping that from happening? I mean, that is a valid concern, right? I mean, it's like, what about the potential for abuse? I mean, this absolute power, couldn't this lead to like a tyrannical ruler who just tramples all over,
Sure.
individual rights?
I mean, that's a valid point in Hobbes. He knew this. He acknowledged this.
Yeah.
And he actually addressed it pretty directly.
Yeah.
He acknowledged that yeah, you could have a bad sovereign, a bad ruler,
Yeah.
but he maintained that the risks of having absolute power were so much less than the horrors that would come with anarchy.
Yeah.
He thought that, even a bad ruler was better than no ruler at all.
Okay, so it's like a gamble then.
Yeah, you could say that.
Like we're betting that a powerful ruler is going to use their power, for good. At least not for evil.
No, I mean, Hobbes really believed, right?
Yeah.
That human nature, us the way we are, we need somebody, a strong hand to keep us in check.
Okay, so this absolute power needs to be strong enough to enforce order,
Right.
but also restrained enough to prevent tyranny.
Yeah.
I mean, so what happens to individual liberty under this kind of system?
Well, here's the thing about Hobbes, right?
Yeah.
His understanding of liberty, it might actually surprise you.
Okay.
He didn't think of it as like this freedom to just do whatever you want, right?
Uh-huh.
He defined it as the freedom to act within the bounds of the law.
Yeah, okay.
So as long as what you're doing isn't, explicitly forbidden,
Yeah.
you're good. You're free to do it.
So liberty exists within the framework of the law. It doesn't exist in opposition to it.
Exactly. Yeah. Hobbes, he thought that true liberty could only exist if you had the protection of a sovereign.
Wow.
He argued that without laws and a power to enforce those laws, our freedoms, our liberty.
They're just theoretical at that point.
Yeah, they're constantly under threat, just by the whims of other people,
Yeah, just by
It's like everybody's out for themselves in that state of nature, right?
Yeah.
So you need that security, that protection of the Leviathan.
Okay, so that's the Leviathan, that's what provides that.
That's what lets us actually exercise our freedom.
Okay, and it's because we don't have that fear of repercussion.
Without that constant fear. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different way of thinking about freedom.
It is.
I mean, it's not just like do whatever you want.
No, it's not anarchy.
It's more about what are we free to do within a structured society.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think to really understand how this whole thing works, we need to understand Hobbes's emphasis on reason and science.
Okay.
As the bedrock of a good, stable society.
Okay, so let's delve into that. I mean, why were reason and science so crucial to Hobbes's vision of a well-ordered commonwealth?
Okay, so Hobbes thought that reason was our main tool, right, for understanding the world and figuring out how to get around in it, how to navigate it.
Okay.
And he saw it as this process of calculation,
Yeah.
Like you compare ideas, contrast them, and then you draw logical conclusions.
Okay.
He actually even compared reasoning to arithmetic.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like this systematic, methodical thing, right?
Okay.
So it's not about relying on tradition.
On intuition?
Yeah, or superstition or any of that stuff. It's about using logic and evidence, actual facts,
Okay.
to guide our decisions.
So he's really advocating for using those things to make decisions, to take action.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this whole thing about reason, it extended to his view of science,
Right.
Remember, he was writing during the scientific revolution,
Oh yeah.
There were all these huge discoveries happening, this real shift toward empirical observation and experimentation.
Yeah, it was a huge change.
Right. And Hobbes saw science as the key to unlocking that deeper understanding of the natural world.
I mean, it's fascinating how he connected those advancements in science, those discoveries,
Yeah.
to his political philosophy.
It all connects.
It's like he's saying that if we can understand the mechanisms of the physical world,
Yeah.
then we can also understand the mechanisms of society.
Of government, yeah.
I mean, it's a really
And vice versa.
yeah, and vice versa. It's a really cool, like,
He thought that by applying these principles, right, of reason and scientific inquiry to politics, we could create a more rational society,
okay,
a more stable society, one that was based on real knowledge and thought,
yeah, not just kind of
instead of just like blindly following tradition or blind faith or
superstition, outdated traditions.
I mean, but reason it's not infallible, is it?
That's true.
I mean, we all know that even the smartest people, the most logical people,
the best of us,
they can make mistakes.
Yeah.
They can, run into situations where there are no easy answers.
And Hobbes recognized that.
Yeah.
He said that, okay, yeah, reason is our most powerful tool.
Yeah.
But it needs to be tempered with something else. Something he called prudence.
Prudence,
Which is like practical wisdom.
Stuff that you get through experience.
So it's not just about being smart.
It's not enough to just be book smart, right?
Yeah.
You gotta know how to apply that knowledge, that reason,
Right.
in the real world, you
Right.
know, where things are messy and
Where it's not just an equation.
yeah, where stuff happens that you don't expect.
Yeah.
And prudence for Hobbes was about understanding people,
Okay.
recognizing that we don't know everything,
Right.
and being able to change with the times, adapt.
It sounds like he's advocating for a balance between like the theoretical
Yeah,
and the practical.
absolutely.
Like you need both.
You need both, yeah.
Yeah.
And a good ruler, a wise ruler,
Needs both.
needs to have both.
Yeah.
Now, we can talk all day about reason and science and prudence, but we can't ignore our passions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Hobbes spent a lot of time in Leviathan exploring these emotions and how they impact us.
Okay, let's talk about passions.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking love, you're talking hate, fear, anger.
All those intense things.
I mean, all those things that drive us to do things
Sometimes they make us do things that we wouldn't normally do.
that we regret.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how did Hobbes fit those into this whole rational, this whole kind of mechanistic view of human nature?
Well, he recognized that passions are a fundamental part of who we are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't be human without them.
We'd be robots.
Yeah, we'd be machines.
Yeah.
And he saw them as powerful motivators.
Okay.
They can drive us towards good. They can drive us towards bad. It all depends.
Depends which way they're going.
Yeah, he actually he gave this whole detailed list of human passions in Leviathan,
Right.
showing how they can influence everything from our relationships, personal relationships, to our big, political decisions like how we vote.
I mean, so these passions, they're like another set of gears in the human machine.
You could say that.
Right. I mean, sometimes they're working in harmony with reason.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just throwing a wrench into the whole works.
Sometimes they're working against it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And Hobbes thought that passions, they can be disruptive, but they can actually help a society be more stable
Okay.
if they're channeled in the right way.
So it's about understanding how they work.
Yeah, and harnessing that power.
Yeah, and kind of
For good.
for good. Yeah, for the good of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, for the common good.
Yeah, for the common
A
good.
good sovereign, a wise sovereign.
We'll understand these things.
We'll understand how people work, how their minds work, what motivates them, what scares them.
And they'll use that to their advantage.
Yeah, and they'll use reason to try to appeal to the better angels of our nature, you know?
To get us to
get us to do what's right and not just what feels good in the moment.
Yeah.
Create laws that take all of that into account.
That's a very sophisticated understanding of human motivation.
It is.
I mean, it's recognizing that we're not just rational creatures.
Right, we're not just robots, we're not just computers.
Yeah.
We're more than that.
We're emotional beings too.
Yeah, we're complicated.
And that's really interesting. And it kind of brings us to another, I think, fascinating part of Hobbes's thought. his exploration of religion
Okay.
and its role in the Commonwealth.
Yeah,
I mean, this might seem kind of surprising to some people,
it might.
given his focus on reason, on secular authority.
Right. You wouldn't
Mhm.
necessarily,
You wouldn't think that that's where he would go.
you wouldn't think it would be such a big part of it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So how does religion, I mean, which is often seen as a matter of faith and belief,
Right.
fit into this whole this whole scientific framework that he's constructed?
Yeah, I mean, Hobbes was really, really aware of how powerful religion can be,
Oh yeah.
you know? It can bring people together,
Yeah.
but it can also tear them apart.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
And he spent a lot of time in Leviathan, like analyzing religious doctrines.
Wow.
Scriptural interpretation, the relationship between religious and civil authority.
So he wasn't afraid to tackle these big questions.
No, he wasn't afraid of controversy.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid of controversy at all.
About the intersection of faith and politics.
You jump right in. Yeah.
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 All right. Well, I'm ready for some more Hobbesian fireworks. How did he reconcile the power of religious belief with the absolute power of the Leviathan? I mean, how do those two things?
Yeah, I mean, how do you square those two things?
Yeah, yeah. How do they work together? I mean, yeah, just how do you fit those two big ideas together?
So Hobbes, like the systematic thinker he is, he kind of applies that concept of sovereignty to God, to the divine.
Okay.
He argues that God, much like the earthly sovereign that we've been talking about,
Okay.
possesses absolute power too,
Yeah.
and rules over this divine kingdom.
So we're talking about like God is a kind of a cosmic Leviathan here.
That's a really interesting way to put it, and I think you're right. I think
Okay.
it really does kind of capture the essence of what Hobbes was getting at.
Okay.
He's not putting God off in some abstract,
Yeah, yeah.
ethereal plane or something.
Right.
He's bringing the divine into that political framework.
Into the Leviathan.
Yeah, that he's built exactly. He's emphasizing that God is an active ruler,
Right.
a sovereign figure.
But how does this divine kingdom, like, how does it relate to the earthly commonwealth that we've been spending so much time on?
Right.
I mean, are we talking about like a theocracy here?
Yeah.
Where religious leaders are calling the shots?
So Hobbes distinguishes between two kinds of God's kingdom.
Okay.
There's the kingdom by nature,
Okay.
which applies to, everything, all of creation,
Right.
governed by God's eternal laws.
The big guy upstairs.
Yeah, exactly. But then there's the kingdom by pact,
Okay, the kingdom by pact.
which is based on a covenant,
A covenant.
an agreement
Yeah.
between God and humanity.
This sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah.
It's
Well-
reminding me of the social contract,
Exactly.
where we give up some of our freedoms.
Right, in exchange for protection and order.
Yeah. So is he drawing a parallel between these two kinds of agreements?
Yeah, absolutely. He points to the Old Testament.
Okay.
And the Israelites, the covenant that they made with God at Mount Sinai,
Right.
they chose God as their sovereign,
Right.
They agreed to follow his laws
In exchange for.
in exchange for protection, for blessings, all of that.
Okay.
And this, for Hobbes, this was like the model of a true theocracy,
Okay.
where God is directly ruling through his,
Representatives.
his chosen people. Exactly.
Okay. So this raises the question then of like, who are those representatives?
Right.
How do they fit into this whole Leviathan where the earthly sovereign has absolute power?
Right.
I mean, does the earthly sovereign's power, does it come from God? Does it come from the people? Like, where does it come from?
So Hobbes, he really gets into the Old Testament again.
Okay.
He talks
Yeah.
about the role of prophets. Right.
Priests,
Okay.
kings,
Yeah.
and how they exercised authority as God's, earthly representatives.
Okay, so it's like a
He sees this like direct line,
direct line from God
from God.
down to these chosen individuals.
So where does that leave the civil sovereign? I mean, the Leviathan that we've been focusing on this whole time.
Right. I mean, how do you reconcile those two?
Yeah, I mean, is it ultimately coming from God? Is it coming from the people?
So Hobbes, he walks this really fine line here.
Okay.
He says that the civil sovereign, the ruler,
Yeah.
they get their authority from the people,
From the people.
from the consent of the governed. But
Hmm.
their right to rule
Yeah.
ultimately comes from God.
Wow. Okay. So
It's both.
it's like the people choose the ruler, but that ruler is also like answerable to a higher power.
Right. It's this interplay, right,
Uh-huh.
between divine right
Okay.
and popular sovereignty. And it shows you how worried Hobbes was
Yeah.
about conflict,
Between
between religious power
yeah,
and civil power.
especially he was writing
He
during
lived through some crazy times.
the English Civil War.
Yeah, I mean, talk about upheaval, right?
That was a
Religious and political,
yeah, it was a mess.
a total mess.
And a reminder of what can happen when those fears clash.
Yeah, and that state of nature,
Yeah.
it's always lurking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so he's trying to avoid that.
He wants to prevent that at all costs.
Yeah.
So he argues that the civil sovereign
Okay.
has to have the final say
On everything.
on everything, including religion.
Wow. Okay, so it's about keeping that hierarchy,
Yeah, clear lines of authority.
Yeah, with the earthly sovereign at the top.
Right, you got to know who's in charge.
Even when it comes to religion, I mean that's pretty
Yeah, it's all about order,
Yes.
unity, making sure that the commonwealth doesn't fall apart.
It's amazing. I mean, Hobbes takes all these huge ideas
Yeah.
and weaves them together into this really comprehensive,
Yeah.
I mean, audacious system.
He was a bold thinker.
It really is. I mean, from his view of man as this machine,
Right.
to the power dynamics of the Leviathan,
Right.
to even the divine right of kings. I mean,
It's all connected.
it's a huge, it's a grand vision
It's a grand vision, yeah.
of how societies work.
It's a blueprint almost
Yeah.
for how to create a stable and just society.
And that balance between
Yeah, that's the key, right?
yeah, that balance between freedom and security.
Yeah.
It's like he's right there on the
You need both.
yeah. You need both.
You can't have one without the other.
So what are we supposed to make of Hobbes and this Leviathan in the 21st century? I mean, some of his ideas they feel a little,
Outdated.
yeah, a
Equal.
little extreme.
Yeah, a little extreme. I mean, absolute sovereignty, the role of religion. I mean, it might seem,
Dangerous.
dangerous to a lot of people today, but his work,
It still matters.
it does. It still sparks debate.
Yeah.
It still challenges how we think about
About power, about government, about ourselves.
human nature.
Yeah, I mean that's what the great thinkers do, right?
Yeah.
They give us these frameworks for understanding.
Yeah.
Even if those frameworks, need to be tweaked a little bit.
Updated.
Yeah, updated, as we learn more, as the world changes.
And he makes us really think about
He makes us question
Yeah.
our assumptions
Yeah.
about how things should work, how society should be run. Yeah, he makes us grapple with those big questions.
those are the important ones.
Yeah.
The ones that don't have easy answers.
Yeah, I mean, and that tension between wanting to be free, and needing
Individual liberty.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
also the need for order,
Yeah.
for structure.
I mean, it's just
Those are things we're still wrestling with today.
it's yeah, and it's all tied into human nature, which is just it's so complicated.
It's messy.
Yeah, and Hobbes gets that.
He gets it.
He really does.
So, listeners, we've taken you on quite a journey here
We have
through the mind of Thomas Hobbes,
through the Leviathan.
into the depths of Leviathan.
Yeah, and we hope that you've come away with
A little bit of a better understanding
just a little bit more.
of this huge, this really important work.
Yeah, of just how complex, how fascinating his thought really is.
And how relevant it still is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe it's even sparked some new questions for you.
Yeah, get those gears turning.
Yeah, make you want to learn more, dive deeper on your own,
That's what these deep dives are all about, right?
That's the goal. It's not just about giving you answers.
It's about getting you to ask the question.
It's about sparking that curiosity.
Yeah, encouraging you to keep exploring these ideas.
To keep thinking critically.
Yeah.
To keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. And on that note, we're going to leave you to ponder these things.
Yeah, keep those minds churning.
And until our next deep dive, don't be afraid
To question, to challenge, to explore.
yeah, to really dig into those ideas that shape our world.
Happy exploring, everybody.
And we'll see you next time.